King Charles entered the private courtroom, expecting an uncomfortable dispute. He left carrying a truth capable of tearing through his marriage, his family, and the carefully protected memory of Diana. The court did not merely confirm that a hidden will existed. It ruled that Camilla had discovered the document years earlier, concealed it from royal executors, and allowed decisions to be made that directly contradicted Diana's final instructions. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles felt the room tighten as the sealed hearing began. Camilla sat beside the king, while William remained several seats away, divided from them by lawyers and silence. A sealed probate review, a private court process examining disputed wills and estate records, had been opened because material was missing from Diana's archive. The papers could determine who protected her letters, possessions, and final wishes for her sons. The judge lifted the disputed document and spoke without hesitation. Diana had written a supplementary will, meaning an additional legal instruction attached to her main will, shortly before her death. 2 witnesses had signed it. The pages directed how personal belongings, private correspondence, and protections for William and Harry were to be handled. Then came the blow. Camilla had found the document inside a locked correspondence case after marrying Charles, removed it from the official archive, and kept it from the executors for years. Charles did not interrupt. He stared ahead until the judge explained that the concealment had shaped decisions involving Diana's sons and possessions. Only then did the monarch's face change. Across the table, William gripped the wood until his knuckles whitened. The prince would not look at his father. His pain came from one brutal truth. His mother's final wishes had not been lost. Someone had known at the darkest possible moment. A court clerk stepped forward and placed a certified copy before Charles. The king read the first page, lowered it slowly, and turned toward Camilla. "How long did you know?" he asked. Camilla did not deny holding it. She said she feared the contents would destroy the fragile stability Charles had built after Diana's death. Yet the explanation deepened the wound, because fear had become permission to silence a dead woman and overrule 2 living sons. The judge then announced that one clause named the person Diana trusted to protect William and Harry, if palace interests ever threatened her intentions. But before that name could be read aloud, Charles had to confront the woman beside him and discover whether her silence had been an act of fear, ambition, or calculated control. The ruling did not strike 4 public figures in the same way. For Charles, it was a betrayal inside the marriage he had defended for decades. For Camilla, it was the collapse of a secret she believed had been permanently buried. For William and Harry, it was something even more painful, proof that their mother had tried to protect them from beyond the grave, only for her final voice to be deliberately silenced. Charles entered the side chamber without waiting. Camilla followed, but the king did not offer her a seat. For years, he had insisted their marriage represented stability, not another chapter in Diana's tragedy. That mattered because the monarchy had asked the public, and his sons, to believe old wounds had closed. Now the woman beside him had reopened them. Charles kept his voice low. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Camilla looked toward the door and answered that there had never been a safe time. The queen consort said the truth would have shattered their home, damaged his reign, and dragged Diana into every room. Yet he heard something colder beneath her fear. She had decided which truth he could know. William walked into a separate consultation room and faced his solicitor. A solicitor is a lawyer who advises clients and prepares legal matters before court. The prince did not ask about money. He said the betrayal was not about jewels, estates, or embarrassment. It was about someone deciding that his mother's words no longer mattered. Her instructions protected private letters, heirlooms, and the right of both sons to keep palace interests away from their grief. The will made that protection unmistakable. One clause forbade Diana's private correspondence from entering any household controlled by a future spouse of Charles. Another ordered a sealed collection of letters delivered to William when he became the direct heir, the person next in line to inherit the crown. Diana had anticipated a struggle over her memory, and she chose her elder son to stop it. Harry received the court summary through a secure recorded call with the legal team. He said nothing at first. Then he asked 3 times whether the signature was truly his mother's. Each confirmation landed harder than the last, because Diana had reached for both sons, and someone had hidden her hand. The lawyers then delivered one final blow before the court could resume proceedings. Camilla had not found the will by accident. She obtained it after a confrontation inside Clarence's house. To understand why Camilla crossed that line, the story must return to one winter evening, when a private argument turned Diana's forgotten correspondence into the monarchy's most dangerous secret. Years before the court exposed the truth, the hidden will came within moments of reaching Diana's sons. It was not lost in a dusty archive or forgotten by careless officials. It surfaced during a private inventory at Clarence's house, where one argument, one locked case, and one decision made behind a closed door transformed an overlooked document into a secret powerful enough to haunt the crown. Camilla entered the inventory room, believing the task would be routine. Selected belongings connected to Diana had been gathered for review after her marriage to Charles, because officials needed to decide which items belonged to William and Harry, which remained part of the royal collection, and which required private storage. An inventory was simply a formal list used to record ownership and location, but this one carried the weight of unfinished grief. A records officer placed a dark leather correspondence case on the table. The case had come from an older Kensington Palace archive after being mislabeled among stationery and family photographs. Camilla opened it during the winter meeting and found sealed letters addressed to William. Beneath them lay Diana's handwritten supplementary will, an added legal instruction attached to an existing will. Charles entered without warning. He saw Diana's belongings and asked why they had been brought into their home. Camilla closed the case before the king could see the document. She told him the contents were duplicate correspondence and promised the matter would be removed before dinner. He accepted her answer, unaware that the queen consort had already read enough to understand the danger. Later that evening, the records officer returned and requested the case for formal registration. Camilla refused. She claimed Charles had ordered that no further material linked to Diana be allowed to disturb the household. The officer hesitated, then quietly wrote the refusal in the margin of the inventory sheet. That small note became the first surviving trail the court would later use to reconstruct the concealment. Camilla acted before midnight. She removed the supplementary will, returned the letters, and resealed the case so it appeared complete when it reached the archive. Alone, she read Diana's clause, excluding any future royal spouse from controlling her private legacy. The words struck directly at her place beside Charles, and at the stability she had fought to build. Camilla folded the document once, then again, and locked it inside her own correspondence cabinet in silence. The decision lasted less than a minute. Its consequences would last for years. Years later, that single act would return to the courtroom, where Charles could no longer ask what Camilla had done, only why she had allowed him to live inside a lie. When the courtroom recessed, Charles did not summon advisors, lawyers, or courtiers. He closed the door of a private consultation room and faced Camilla alone. The king who had defended her against public condemnation now stood before the one accusation he could not dismiss. His devastation was not loud at first. It emerged through a quieter realization. She had watched him protect her reputation, while knowing Diana's final wishes remained hidden. Charles raised one hand when his private secretary tried to follow. He asked for 10 minutes and shut the door before anyone could object. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages a monarch's official work, but even that trusted figure was excluded. This was no longer a palace problem. It was a marriage breaking under the weight of a buried truth. Camilla stood beside the table and insisted the document had been legally uncertain and emotionally dangerous. She said releasing it during the most fragile years of their marriage would have reignited hatred, damaged Charles, and dragged Diana's death back into every public conversation. The queen consort called her silence protection. The king heard control. Charles placed the certified copy between them. A certified copy is a court-verified duplicate accepted as legally accurate. He pressed his palm against the page and finally looked at her. "You let me defend you without telling me what I was defending." Camilla answered that she had protected their marriage because no one else would. Charles leaned forward, his anger still controlled but no longer hidden. He told her she had protected herself by taking a choice that belonged to William and Harry. Their mother's words, their inheritance, and their grief had never been hers to manage. Camilla reached across the table toward his hand. Charles moved his chair backward. Her arm remained suspended for a breath before she slowly withdrew it, and the distance between them suddenly felt greater than the walls around them. Camilla then admitted she had read the entire will. She knew William would eventually receive authority over Diana's private archive, meaning the protected collection of her letters, records, and personal material. Worse, she confessed that another item had been attached, a sealed note addressed directly to Charles. The king stared at her. She had never opened it, but she had hidden it with the will for all those years. Outside, William received the update from his solicitor. The note might explain why Diana had excluded Camilla from any future power over her belongings. Yet the next decision would not belong to Charles or Camilla, because the court was preparing to name the person who now held legal control over Diana's silenced instructions. The court's most consequential ruling was not the confirmation that Camilla had hidden the will. It was the enforcement of the document itself. Diana had anticipated that her wishes might one day collide with palace interests, and she had prepared for that possibility with extraordinary precision. Her final safeguard identified one person who would inherit the authority to recover her letters, protect her possessions, and challenge anyone who attempted to rewrite her intentions. William sat motionless, as the judge explained why the document could no longer be challenged. Independent experts had verified Diana's signature, the witnesses, the paper's origin, and legal notes written at the same time. A supplementary will is an added instruction attached to an existing will, and this one carried full legal force. That mattered because every hidden letter, disputed heirloom, and blocked decision could now be examined again. The judge then read the clause that changed everything. Diana had granted oversight of her private archive to William once he became direct heir to the throne, with an independent executor supervising the transfer. An executor is the person legally responsible for carrying out a will. The prince was not receiving a ceremonial honor. He was receiving power to recover concealed material, control access to his mother's correspondence, and enforce restrictions against rival royal households. William closed his eyes for one brief moment. Then he asked whether accepting that authority would weaken his father's position. The question exposed the conflict tearing through him. He wanted to protect Diana's wishes, but he did not want the king humiliated by a ruling rooted in Camilla's deception. Charles heard him. The monarch leaned forward and told his son not to surrender his mother's instructions, merely to protect a father from embarrassment. The words cost him, but he said them clearly. Diana's voice had already been buried once. He would not ask William to bury it again. The court moved immediately. Investigators received authority to search private storage linked to Camilla's former Clarence House office, including locked cabinets never entered into palace inventory. Minutes later, a solicitor returned with a documented chain of custody report confirming that the sealed note addressed to Charles had been found inside a velvet pouch marked with the Queen Consort's private household symbol. William looked toward his father. Charles did not reach for the note. Before anyone could break the seal, the palace received another warning. Several decisions involving Diana's possessions could now be legally reversed. Nothing connected to her legacy could remain beyond his review. The ruling had given William control, but its first consequences would fall elsewhere. As doors closed, privileges vanished, and Camilla discovered how quickly royal protection could turn into isolation. By the time the royal cars returned from court, the judgment had already begun reshaping palace life. Meetings were cancelled, archive permissions were suspended, staff received carefully worded instructions that avoided accusation but removed Camilla from every process connected to Diana. Inside, however, each quiet administrative decision carried the same devastating message. Trust had been withdrawn. William's new authority moved through the palace faster than any public statement. Transfers, exhibitions, loans, and publications involving Diana's private belongings were frozen immediately. An exhibition loan is temporary permission to display an item elsewhere, and even those routine arrangements now required the prince's approval. That mattered because every object connected to his mother could carry emotional, legal, or historical meaning that had once been decided without him. Charles made the next decision himself. He authorized an independent review, meaning investigators outside his household would examine the records without palace pressure. The king understood why that separation mattered. If his own staff controlled the inquiry, every finding would look protected by marriage. By stepping back, he showed William that the crown would not shield Camilla from consequences. Camilla returned to her sitting room and stopped beside an open cabinet. 2 archive boxes had vanished. She asked the household secretary who had approved their removal under the court order. The answer came quietly. The king did. The queen consort dismissed everyone, sat alone, and slipped off her wedding ring. For several minutes, she held it in her palm, before placing it back on her finger. Charles cancelled their evening dinner without calling her. No explanation followed. His silence told her more than anger could. He was not ready to speak as a husband, because the monarch had already acted. Investigators then found a handwritten list among the recovered records. Camilla had identified which Diana letters might cause future instability if released to William. One missing entry carried only 2 words, Charles alone. The phrase suggested the concealed note had never been intended for a court, a household, or the public. It belonged to him. William sent his father a private request before midnight. No Camilla, no lawyers, no courtiers. Only Charles, his son, and Diana's final sealed words. Charles read the request twice and kept the page beside him. For the first time since court, the king allowed grief to rise above his fury. William was not summoning a sovereign to defend an institution. He was asking a father to remember. The monarchy had begun imposing consequences, but the true turning point would come not through another ruling, only through a father, a son, and the words of a woman neither had ever stopped mourning. There were no judges in the room, no advisors arranging language, and no courtiers waiting to contain the damage. Charles and William sat opposite each other with Diana's unopened note between them. For years, they had carried different versions of the same grief. The husband burdened by guilt, the son burdened by loss. Now the hidden will had forced them toward a truth neither man could face alone. William arrived at the Windsor Library after midnight and refused assistance. He insisted that Diana's appointed independent executor witness the opening. An executor is the person legally trusted to carry out a will, and this one mattered because neither the king nor the prince could afford another shadow over the document's authenticity. The truth had to survive grief and royal pressure. The executor examined the seal, signature record, and court certificate, then confirmed the note was genuine. The official left, closing the door behind him. Charles and his son were alone, stripped of titles, advisors, and every institution that normally stood between feeling and duty. Charles broke the seal with trembling fingers. He unfolded the page but could not begin. After several silent seconds, the king passed it across the table. William took the letter, read the first lines aloud, and stopped when his voice faltered. Diana did not accuse her former husband. She asked him to protect their sons from becoming weapons in the emotional war that had surrounded their parents. William continued. Diana explained that Camilla had been excluded from her private estate, not as punishment, but as a boundary. She wanted William and Harry to possess one part of their mother's life that could never be managed by the marriage that followed her. That mattered, because her letters were not palace property. They carried private love, pain, and guidance, intended for 2 boys who had already lost too much. Then came the sentence that broke Charles's composure. Diana warned him never to confuse preserving the monarchy with silencing painful truth. The monarch lowered his head and pressed one hand against the page. He had spent years defending stability. Now he understood how easily stability could become another name for silence. Charles looked at William and made the decision plainly. The court's ruling would be obeyed in full. Camilla would permanently surrender every claim, privilege, and advisory role connected to Diana's archive, possessions, and legacy. William nodded, but neither man called it victory. Father and son left together, carrying a decision already threatened by public fury. Their private decision restored Diana's voice inside the palace, but outside the gates, a single front page was about to transform a family betrayal into a national reckoning. At dawn, the secret escaped the courtroom and entered every home in Britain. The public did not encounter the story through legal language or palace explanation. They saw it condensed into one brutal image: Charles leaving court with his face lowered, Camilla several steps behind, and William walking alone in the opposite direction. By breakfast, the hidden will had become more than a royal scandal. It had become a judgment on memory, loyalty, and truth. Broadcasters broke into normal programming with confirmation that the court had validated Diana's supplementary will and found that Camilla deliberately concealed it. A supplementary will is an added legal instruction attached to an existing will, and its approval meant the document now carried full force. That mattered, because every decision made against Diana's wishes could be challenged, and every palace explanation would now be measured against a court judgment. Charles received the first draft of the palace response before breakfast. Communications staff described the concealment as an administrative failure, language designed to reduce blame and protect the institution. The king crossed out the phrase. He knew this was not paperwork misplaced by accident. It was a choice that had affected Diana's sons, her possessions, and the public's trust in the crown. One newspaper captured the anger with a front page that spread across television screens. Diana's last words were hidden. Beneath the photograph of Charles leaving court appeared a smaller caption: "King orders full restoration of her wishes." Outside Kensington Palace, crowds gathered with white roses, handwritten messages, and folded copies of that page beneath the gates, linked forever to Diana's memory. William watched the broadcast alone. A woman in the crowd told a reporter that Diana had been silenced in life, and nearly silenced again in death. The prince lowered his head as her words reached him. He had gained authority over his mother's legacy, yet the victory felt inseparable from the pain that made it necessary. Camilla heard commentators call the concealment a betrayal of two grieving sons. She switched off the television before the discussion ended. The queen consort could withstand public anger, but this accusation cut deeper because it named the human cost she had tried not to face. Charles personally rewrote the statement. The monarch accepted that a grave wrong had occurred and confirmed that no member of the royal family stood above Diana's lawful instructions. Yet Britain still waited for the final consequence. His next announcement would reveal whether those words required sacrifice, or whether royal protection would return after anger faded. With the world watching, the king could no longer separate the husband from the sovereign, and his final verdict would define both. Charles's final decision did not erase the betrayal, restore the lost years, or return Diana to the sons who still carried her absence. But it ended the silence. Standing before his family, the king accepted that love could not excuse concealment, and that loyalty to a spouse could never require disloyalty to the dead. The monarchy would survive this moment only by surrendering the protection of secrecy and choosing the harder protection of truth. Charles convened the final private meeting with William, Camilla, the independent executor, and Harry joining through a secure recorded connection. An executor is the person legally responsible for carrying out a will, and this official's presence mattered because every promise now had to become enforceable action. The full document entered Diana's estate record, reopening each decision that had violated her instructions. Charles spoke first. Camilla would hold no role in Diana's archive, correspondence, possessions, memorial arrangements, or any institution created in her name. The king made the restriction permanent. His marriage would continue, but it would no longer survive through denial or protection from consequences. Camilla accepted the ruling without protest. She admitted through a documented statement read inside the meeting that fear of losing Charles had driven her to hide the will. The queen consort then acknowledged the truth she had resisted for years. Her fear created a wound deeper than honest disclosure ever could have caused. William answered with restraint. The prince told her that forgiveness could not be ordered by a judge or produced by one apology. He promised civility, but said trust would return only through years of honesty. Harry then asked that Diana's private words remain protected from public exploitation. His brother agreed immediately, proving that their mother's dignity could still unite them above palace rivalry. Charles accepted his own share of blame. The monarch admitted he had created a household where silence sometimes felt safer than truth. That confession did not remove Camilla's responsibility, but it ended the final excuse surrounding it. Diana's possessions returned to the structure she had chosen. Her letters passed under her son's protection. Her hidden will became not a weapon against the crown, but a boundary the crown was finally forced to respect. Charles lost an illusion. William inherited duty without satisfaction or triumph. And when the last signature was placed beneath the court's order, the matter was closed, not because the pain had disappeared, but because Diana's voice had finally been heard, her sons had finally been protected, and the crown had finally chosen truth over silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.